Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Today I have Ashwini with me, and she is going to ask some questions about the framework for knowledge production and consumption that I am discussing over this series.
Yeah, actually, I went through your framework, which you did, and very interesting. But I was really curious to know, what prompted you to make this framework? What is it that went into your mind and made you do this framework in particular?
Well, as I was giving lectures about my books, the work on Mahabharata or Ramayana, what would happen is after the lecture in a question answer session, or also through emails and Facebook and other social media, people would ask questions like this. Very typical, think of it as a frequently asked question.
Yeah.
They would say, okay, I understand you use astronomy evidence and from Mahabharata text and came up with a date of Mahabharata war. But I also know of many or read of many other researchers who also have used astronomy evidence and they have come up with a date which is different than yours.
I think 130.
More than 130 claims
Okay.
for Mahabharata
Yeah.
war timeline. Now, out of that, more than 50%, which is more than 60 of them, are based on astronomy evidence, or at least they claim that it is based on astronomy evidence. And frankly, there are those many different years proposed.
Okay.
So people wonder, I mean, how can I trust this astronomy evidence
Challenging,
model?
yeah.
How can I trust it?
Yeah.
So that was one aspect. But the second aspect was because they think everybody has used astronomy evidence and still leading to different conclusions. Why is that?
Yeah.
And then I would typically go into evidence and try to show them how some other researcher has totally not used a certain evidence, especially that would have falsified his theory and
So a lot
proposal.
of time went in falsification
Yes,
of other theories.
other theories. But to a ordinary reader, and frankly even a researcher, I would like to think it's basics if you want to do any scientific investigation. But either they don't know this, or if they know it, they have not exhibited that in their research, which is this. And to explain that, I thought I need to frame it in some fashion so that it's easy for people to understand. So that's when I
That's
thought
when.
I should do a framework.
Okay, interesting. But I have a question that what made you select the X and Y axis kind of a model? Why not other models? Because I have read some other models also which classify, which help in negating or making something, asserting something. But why the X and Y axis theory? Or why this model? Why this particular model?
Okay. Yeah, so you can do a triangular, circular,
Yes.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, first thing, I don't want to say that the X and Y axis is my invention in any way.
Yeah.
If you look at Myers-Briggs, you will see again goes like X and Y, feeling versus
Yes.
judging, and introvert versus
Yes,
extrovert,
yes.
and so on.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey model is also urgency and importance, and those X and Y axis. So you can choose a type of model.
Okay.
I felt because you want to make a clear distinction between the research of one researcher versus the other. The beauty of a X and Y axis is that it shows that opposite. Like somebody did this
Yeah.
versus other did not do
Did not do
this.
this, yeah.
So
So
think-
it's easy to classify, is what you're saying.
It's easy to classify.
Categorize.
Yeah, and it's almost like think
Because-
of it as a black and white
Yeah.
for people to make the clear distinction.
Yeah, because you've given very interesting names and like a dharmic superstar on the right hand side
Yeah.
and the preserver of tradition on the left top quadrant, the tamasic skeptic on the left bottom quadrant, and the superficial manipulator on the right bottom quadrant. So do you think there can be a third dimension? Like this is a two-dimensional model. Do you envisage yourself doing a third dimension on this model?
Yes, let's see if I can pull this. We look at the two axes.
Right.
So vertical axis is that of evidence with the end says all evidence versus the other end being arbitrary or selective. The horizontal axis is testability
Yes.
and it's yes or no.
No.
So that's actually also another interesting aspect is This is not always possible.
Right.
But if possible, if we, in building a model, if we can choose one axis which is yes and no, pass or fail, that is good. So testability is either yes or no, it's a discrete, as opposed to more evidence versus less evidence.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
the testability part is on each and every individual evidence. That
Correct.
is why it could be a yes or no.
Correct.
But however, whether the all evidence or arbitrary could be a more qualitative. Do you think?
Well, okay. So if the evidence is qualitative, now what do you mean by qualitative?
Which a number cannot be assigned, or which is not quantifiable, or which is not measurable.
Okay.
Can those also be put here? The non-measurable evidence.
No, that's a great question. So what even in fact I might write a word here. Now I have not written for deliberate reasons,
Okay.
but in principle,
Yeah.
instead of all evidence, I may say all relevant evidence.
Evidence.
To give you a quick example, suppose the theory is like, take my theory of astronomy observations.
Yes.
Now Mahabharata text has a lot of other evidence.
Yes.
There is a geological evidence, hydrological evidence, rivers, for example, the river Saraswati,
Yes.
which no longer exists.
Okay.
But if my theory is based on astronomy evidence, then I have nothing to say about river Saraswati.
Yeah.
Okay, so that evidence automatically is not part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so but to answer your question of qualitative,
Yeah.
testability means subject independent testing. If you follow the procedure that I described, and if you follow it, you should able to reach the same conclusions as
You
I
have
reached.
reached. Okay.
Then it's testable.
Okay. What about the third dimension? Are you thinking of adding a third dimension to this, or is it possible in the first place?
Well, it is possible, and actually I have added a third dimension,
Okay.
but in a slightly different fashion. So there are these 4 different categories:
Right.
preserver of tradition, dharmic superstar, tamasic skeptic, and
Superficial manipulator.
if you remember, you helped me when I was describing this category.
Yes.
You helped me with the words,
Yes.
superficial and manipulator.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Thesaurus helped me to help you.
Yeah. So this is 2 dimension.
Okay.
Now, if you add a third dimension, what happens is suddenly the 4 categories would turn to 6 or even 9, and you can actually make many permutation combinations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of think of Myers-Briggs, actually they did that, and there are 4 axes, and it creates 16 combinations and so on. Then it can be difficult for people to remember.
I understand. Yeah. With so many observations, creating another dimension could be a challenge.
Yeah, and it may possibly lose the very benefit
Yeah.
of the in
this
framework. But what I have done, and we won't discuss it today, is that preserver of tradition as is very good, and nothing needs to happen there.
Yeah.
Tamasic skeptic and superficial manipulators are undesired approaches.
Yes.
But
definitely.
in real life, there are plenty of them.
It's going to be there.
Okay, so what we do is, if you look at somebody's research work, if we should able to quickly categorize and able to place them into one of these 4. So those are undesired anyways, the bottom 2. But within dharmic superstar, and I remember you asking if will there be a situation, you remember yesterday when we went for a walk?
Yeah, that whether the dharmic superstar can further be dissected, or
Correct.
further be put on another axis, or that's it.
Or is there a need for it?
Is there a need for it?
Because dharmic superstar
It
sounds
means
like the
it's
perfect
achieved.
thing.
Yeah, because what I thought is the aim would be to move the preserver of tradition to dharmic superstar. That should be the aim of researcher,
Yes.
of any researcher. And once he reaches there, he's there. He's made it.
Right, except
Yeah.
just imagine a scenario, and we have a scenario that we
Yes.
will discuss another time.
Yes.
Is that what if there are, say, 3 individuals who are, for solving a specific problem, look at all the evidence, and all of that evidence is testable. But what if they reach different answers?
Yeah.
Now how do you figure out which one is a better theory?
Yes.
Then actually you can use a framework which will be similar to this, replicated for that dharmic superstar category.
Okay.
The axis will change.
Yeah.
It no longer would be testability,
Right.
and we will talk about that another time.
Sure. Yeah, that will be interesting to understand.
Yes, it would be interesting. So let's take it forward. Next time we will discuss efforts of three different dharmic superstars trying to solve the same problem, but all three of them reach different conclusions. And how to use that third axis framework that you are referring to differentiate between them and to determine which one is a better proposal.
Sure. Thank you all for listening to our conversation. Namaskar.
Namaskar.